Welcome back, friends. In this video, we'll look at a problem that some students face while building their knife game. Specifically, the problem they face is with the throwing knife, right? Now, remember, knife game is part of our intermediate course. The idea is that we have this log with a fixed knife, this black color one, which goes around with the log. We have to throw these throwing knives upwards, but we must make sure that the throwing knife does not hit a fixed knife or another throwing knife, right? Now, what students sometimes face is that though they do everything the way it's been done in the class, everything looks fine, they find that the throwing knife just doesn't behave, right? Unfortunately, this problem is somewhat intermittent in the sense that for some students it just happens sometimes, it doesn't happen after some time, or students do some little things and it gets solved, right? So it's hard to replicate. But recently, a student ran into this problem, so I thought, it would be a good idea for me to save that game because it replicates the problem, and also sort of talk a little bit about it so that you can get an idea of what's going on and possibly fix some of this in a bit more systematic manner. So let's first see the problem here. Like I said, this is students game, still work in progress, so it's not complete. But here everything looks as we had done in the class, right? So we have this, touching fixed knife or log and say this color. But what we find is that the knife behavior is quite strange, right? So most of the time it doesn't come out, but sometimes it does come out, right? Like it did now, right? And in fact, sometimes it comes out and then goes away, like it just went away by itself, right? So it's really something very strange, and I thought it's good to sort of understand what's going on. Now, this is work in progress, so please ignore the fact that lives have gone low and still working, because this code is not complete. I just preserved it at this point because it just illustrates to me the problem that I wanted to illustrate, right? As you also just saw. So let's try to first understand what is possibly going on in this, because that throws some light on how the whole code is structured, right? Notice what happens for the throwing knife, right? So this is, it says fixed knife 2, but really, as you know, it's a throwing knife. It will be renamed later on. What we are doing is that once we start as a clone, these two loops start to run together, right? Which means that first loop, it says that, okay, go down here, glide upwards towards this log, and the second loop is touching, checking for if you're touching this, or say touching this and this, rather touching this and this color, or also touching, say, a log, right? So these two happen in parallel, and I think that's where the problem starts. Now, basically, let's do a little bit of a trick here. Let's say I just said if touching log, then I want to see where this fixed knife is, and I'm going to hence put a stamp, right? And also to make my point more clear, I'm saying, okay, instead of in 0.1 seconds, glide slowly upwards so that we can see what's going on, right? Now, if I do this, right, what happens is if I click the mouse, notice this knife starts to form and it starts to go upwards. And at this point, it has touched the log. That's why, so notice here it's touched log, then stamp, right? So if it touched the log and created a stamp, but interestingly, at this point, it is also touching the color gray, right? Because this knife was still here. So this knife right now is touching log as well as color gray, right? So which means that if we actually do this, then this knife is going to get deleted as soon as it's formed, because this condition here comes true. So it gets formed, it moves upwards, and while it is moving upwards, so remember, it's still not reached its its final location of 050, because that will be the time when it's completely embedded. Still not reached there, but on the way this condition happened, and hence the knife got deleted, right? Now, you may wonder, and it's a very valid question, as to why does this not happen all the time, right? Why is it that sometimes I do get a knife going out and touching that particular, let's say, log, right? Now, the only thing I can think of really is, primarily that the fact that these two loops are running together and this glide is happening really, really fast, right? So 0.1 seconds. So I have a feeling that sometimes, right? Sometimes this loop just kind of runs slightly ahead of this loop, and the point where these two are touching and this condition is happening is just missed, and hence the log gets embedded, right? The other reason that may be playing a role to a limited extent is also that this log, notice, is not a perfect circle, right? So there are points where maybe the knife goes a little bit upward, and again, like I said, these two run in parallel. Sometimes probably the condition gets missed, right? Now the question that comes up is, how do I fix it, right? Now, if you look at this picture, in fact, we have a very good hint of fixing this. What we can do is to really two things, right? We can move the log upwards, and we can move the log or the knife downwards. So what that will do is that it will make sure that when the log and knife touch each other, they are not touching this knife, right? In fact, that's exactly what I did first to solve this part of this problem, which is that I basically move the knife downwards. So let me just clean this thing up. I'll erase all on this. Just compare, let's say, so again, I'm going to say erase all here. Now compare this game, which is the original setting, to say this game, and see it carefully. I have moved the log upwards and I have moved the knife downwards. How I did that was I went to the log and I said it's 050, go to say 060. And likewise for the fixed knife, first it goes to 0 minus 70, which is here, and then it glides up to say 060, right? So if I were to do the same experiment, by setting glide 5 and say put a stamp over here, it's interesting because when I did this now, notice this thing is going up, up, up. So it gets created, but now notice these two are no longer touching, right? So which is why this condition is a little bit more robust, right? uh, of course, what this doesn't still explain is that why is it that the line now, sometimes the log gets embedded in this, it starts moving, and after a while it gets deleted, right? Now really do not have a very good explanation for that, except imagining, or let's say thinking, that possibly somehow this touching color starts to sort of behave a little bit odd, right? Because once the knife has been embedded onto this, even though no matter how this was placed, we know that knife is no longer touching this, right? Because knife is going quite deep inside, right? So then the only thing that comes in is that somehow this condition, touching log and touching color, is coming true. Touching log obviously is true, which is why I suspect that touching color is somehow creating a little bit of an issue, right? And the remedy that I can think of there is that if you see that kind of a problem, then one simple remedy is that just make sure that the knife color is, say, completely different from the lock color. So here I see very little commonality, and this seems to work fine for me. Like I said, this problem itself is intermittent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But having done this, it seems to have become quite robust. Let me just erase everything. So if I just show you, the same game. Oops, sorry, I should make this glide, say, 0.1 seconds. So if I did this, okay, I must erase everything, otherwise it won't work. So go here, and now it seems to work quite fine, right? So this is what I can think of. Now before I just close this thing, I just want to highlight one more point, that as I thought more about it, in fact, a better way to structure the code would have been to not use two loops, because as we just saw, it causes concurrency, parallelism. What we could also do is to just put all this condition inside uh, this forever loop. So what that ensures is that this glide happens, and then this checking conditions are checked. Touching conditions are checked. So which I think will make your code a bit more robust. um, uh, but still, if the touching color doesn't behave well, then yeah, I'm not sure what you can do, right? So let's just summarize. If you face problems with the throwing knife and they are like a little bit confusing, try one of these things. First, like I said, move the log upwards. Next, move the knife downwards. Make sure you can do the touching test that I just did with the stamping. Move the knife downwards. Number three, if your knife color is behaving intermittently or oddly, then just change the color of this knife and get moving. And number four, you can also try to arrange the code, like I said, a little bit differently. That will help. And of course, I think the last thing that students also try to do is that instead of this using this knife color, body color, they also use the handle color. So if that works for you, that's also fine, I guess, right? So I hope this helped you, and at least gave you an idea of what goes on, some amount of thought process into how the game is structured, right? So I take care with that. Do leave your comments if you find there's something more that we can do with this video, right? Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.